So, one thing I say about a topic like this is that think about when we grew up, how many difficult people did we run into? We got to choose our friends growing up, right? Usually it was people in your neighborhood who you went to grade school with, and you kind of expanded that, friend circle as you got into high school, meeting new people from different towns that go to the same township high school. You get into college, it's the same thing. You can always pick and choose the people that you want to be with. Work doesn't happen that way. You're kind of thrown into a situation, and there might be people that work with that could be challenging. So we're going to talk about what some of those characteristics are, and then how we can deal with that so that we can be more productive throughout the workday. I think that's really important, to be able to understand that when we are at work and we have a job, there's goals, and everyone should have the same end goal, be able to get there in a productive and civilized way. So this is dealing with difficult people. So, do you know any difficult people? Think about these people we're going to go through. There is the know it all. Okay. That's the person that knows everything, and it can seem difficult to actually have a conversation with them or to get an idea across or to have them accept an idea because they know more than you know. So, the ways to deal with this is, sometimes it's to make an ally with that person. Okay. Confirm and affirm their thoughts and ideas while also presenting yours. Sometimes we refer to them as the smartest people in the room, and sometimes being the smartest person in the room is only up in their mind. The passives, the passives are the people that don't want to do anything, don't want to offer opinions, don't want to jump in on group projects. When they're on group projects, want to do very little. It's a little different than a passive aggressive, but the passives, are someone that you have to try and help them get out of their shell. So when you're working with someone like that, kind of go along slowly with them, slowly work them in, ask them for what their ideas are. If you don't, sometimes they just bottle that up and they figure, what, if no one sees me, I can fly under the radar and everything will be okay. Then there's the dictators. These are the people you might, come across that just, bullies. It's this way, it's that way. They are prone to outbursts. They're prone to tell you like it is. And sometimes the dictator just needs someone to stand up to them, and that's just a respectful way. That's not a way where you're, coming up eye to eye and engaging in a very tense conversation or argument. So the dictator, sometimes you need to, kind of align with them and then kind of speak to them. Don't be so knee jerk. Take things personal. Speak to them on a level where we can kind of see eye to eye. The yes people can be very difficult to work with because they say yes to everything. They never consider what the timeline is. They never consider what's already on their plate. And what happens, you can get bogged down with the project. You run the risk of missing deadlines when you're working with a yes person. So with the yes people, you have to, really bring it out of them. Like, what is on your plate? What are you doing? Can you handle this? Do you have enough time with this? A lot of times, yes people just put up their hands. Yeah, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And then deadlines are missed and it become a disaster. Then there's the no people. The no people don't want to get involved at all. Like, nope, I have time for nothing. I can't help you. And sometimes that can be detrimental to a team. That can be detrimental to a project. So with the no people, you have to make them allies as well. Kind of let them know, what the consequences are for failing in a project, why you need them, why they're important to a project. And then one other group of difficult people is the gripers, the whiners, where the whole world's against them, everyone's against them, nothing goes their way. Why should things go their way? Those type of people. These are people that can be really, really hard to work with because they always see the negatives and everything. They never look for solutions. You can call these people pessimists as well. Early on in my career, I had to work with a production manager for our magazines that always saw the negative. We'd have these weekly production meetings, and we would sit there, and he would find the problems, he would place the blame, He would complain about them, and then he would sit back. And he felt that his job was done there. That as long as he whined about this, griped about the, vented about this, everything was okay. But it wasn't. So I had had enough in one meeting about 2, 3 months into my role as a managing editor. I said the only thing you ever do is point out the negatives, place blame, and then move on. I said you never look for a solution. I said that doesn't help us. Instead of just complaining about it, how about let's take one complaint one at a time and try to together as a group find a solution. We eventually got to that point, but this was an employee who had been with the company for many, many, many years, so he's kind of locked into that. So with all these difficult people, it's really about working with them, trying to find that common ground, and making work something that's enjoyable to do. And we love this little quote here: "Love difficult people," because you're one of them. We're all difficult in our own way. We might possess one of those traits we just went through. And if you look for list online, you can see 6 difficult peoples, 10, types of difficult people and stuff. The list can grow on, and they'll use different, terminologies for the same thing, grapers and whiners and such. But, just think about it. How are we difficult in our own way? This requires some self-reflection, and that's something we talk about a lot in our EQ classes, which will be coming up later on in the summer. EQ stands for emotional intelligence, and there's 5 pillars. One of those pillars, the first one is self-awareness. Are you aware of all your traits, your positive traits and your negative traits? Because a lot of times those negative traits come to the surface in distressing a situation. So when things get a little tense, those things that would have you, outbursts, yelling, getting defensive and stuff, come to the surface. So we learn how to control them in that class. And through that self-reflection, we can see in what areas we can be difficult. So, we're trying to avoid that at all costs. So one of the big things about dealing with difficult people, be kind. Be kind. I mean, we just saw that, we're all a difficult person. I'm taking my jacket off here. Remember, this is a person, not a problem. It's a person that you're dealing with. We labeled them as yes person, no person, passive, griper, dictator, know it all. But that's really the problem. That's not the person. And there's ways to get around that. Treat them the way you wish to be treated, with respect. Okay, we call that the golden rule: do unto others as you would want done unto yourself. You can take it a step further if you want to, which is the platinum rule, which is treat people the way they want to be treated. Okay, so just understand that we all have goals. We all have deadlines that we have to hit with their jobs. And when we're dealing with someone difficult and those come into question, if we're going to reach those goals and deadlines, things can get tense. But we just treat them with kindness, with a little bit of respect, and we can work through those. Keep your tone and body language lower than theirs. And this is important. People will mirror someone else. So there's a saying that says calm breeds calm. Anger breeds anger. Anxiety breeds anxiety. I worked with an editor, and this editor was prone to going from 0 to 100 on the anxiety scale in the drop of a feather. I mean, just so quickly. And it usually happens as we're approaching deadlines. You got to get magazines out to printers on time, so they get printed on time, they get in the mail on time. The magazines get into the readers' hands on time, thus making our advertisers happy. But as soon as we got close, the anxiety level would raise, and this editor would come into my office and just start going off, talking a mile a minute. There's a little bit of griper in there, big worrier. And I would just let the editor go on and on and on and on. And then I would respond in a very calm way and kind of go step by step of why we're going to make it. We've been in this situation before. We are in good shape. All our articles are in and edited. The majority of them have been laid out. So just in a calm way, explaining where we were in the process, and that would bring the editor down. Bring down, and then we would be in that same level of calmness. If the editor came in and it was like that, and I just got up there with the anxiety, that's not going to help, because we get to this point where we're just frazzled and we're unable to concentrate on the job. So just remember tone and body language, and tone of voice, and we talk about this in EQ too. It's not just the way your voice sounds, okay? It's the speed at which you speak. It's the volume at which you speak. It's your facial expressions. It's your gestures. It's your body language. You have to crush that all down to have your tone of voice. And a lot of times that type of stuff is missing when we're communicating via email or through text message. We don't get to see that. So tone of voice and that body language is important. Seek a resolution, not a fight. I mean, it's easy to get into it. It's easy to get into it and say why you're right and they're wrong, and the person you're getting into with is telling you why you're wrong and they're right. It's easy to do that, but try to find that resolution. Okay, we know what our end goal is. Let's talk about what our potential challenges are in the next 2 weeks, and then how can we, avoid those challenges or get past those challenges in a productive way. Again, if we just sit there spinning our wheels and having a fight and placing blame with each other, like that production manager early on in my career, just placing blame, it doesn't help. It doesn't help at all. So you have to remember we're in this together, especially in the workplace when we're working in groups and on projects. Be an active listener. Active listening is definitely a skill. It's something that we need to practice. It's something that if we don't do a good job at it, we can always learn with it. But it's going to be extremely important in being able to hear someone. The problem with active listening is that our mind is always multitasking. Okay, our mind is always multitasking in the sense that if I'm having a conversation with Eva and Eva's speaking and she says something, at some point I might decide what my response is going to be to that. And she might still go on for another minute or 2 minutes. And then I miss all that because I'm ready to respond. I read a quote a couple years ago in an article about active listening where the writer says, we don't listen to learn, we listen to respond. So, it's really something that we've got to lock in. It's being present in those conversations and paying attention. So making eye contact. That's important when we have conversations to make that eye contact. And that can be difficult sometimes for people. But we're not talking about locking eyes and staring into someone's soul. We're just talking about looking in their eyes. And if you need to, like when you gather your thoughts, you can look away. There's a trick that you may have read about or heard that if you look right above the eyes in the middle of the forehead, it looks like you're making that eye contact. So it's not so uncomfortable. And get rid of the distractions. Get rid of the distractions. Oh, here's my cell phone. It's over here. This is the biggest distractor we have right now, probably in the workplace, and no matter where we are. And this has got to go on silence when we're having a conversation. It's good to put it face down when you're, online working, when you're in a class, when you're in meetings, because face up when that text comes in, when an email comes in, and that screen flashes up, the first thing people do is they look over to that, and it can be a distraction. So we want to eliminate those distractions as best as possible, because it's not only is it hard to then lock in on that conversation as the listener, it can become difficult for someone who's speaking with you for them to concentrate on what they're saying. If you're sitting here every time your phone rings or buzzes and you're looking at this and it lights up, you're looking at that, then you're looking at your watch, and you're kind of like doing this, it becomes distraction, and then there's a difficult time with getting a point across what needs to be said. During our conversations, listening, so count to three before speaking to assure you do not interrupt the one talking. I mean, that's a good rule of thumb, especially when you get into some of these tense situations and someone just seems to maybe to be venting. That editor that would come into my office, I would just let the editor go and go and go until there was like a deep breath and kind of like, okay, 3 seconds, and then I could jump in. You don't want to start talking over someone. It can be difficult in the virtual world too, because the cues are there, the visual cues are there when we all have our cameras on, but it becomes difficult. We start talking over each other, and no one knows what to say. Well, you go, and no, you go. So count to three is something that's good to do. And again, you don't want to speak over anyone because that can become frustrating as well. And once you count to three, and then you could ask a question or you can start to respond. Now you're in control of that conversation. Restate the speaker's words to clarify and acknowledge their feelings. So that's just paraphrasing what they said. And that's important in a lot of conversations because one, it affirms that you have heard the person correctly. When someone is operating on pure emotions, sometimes the message gets jumbled. So that's why you have to paraphrase. It's like, let me make sure that I understand. You're upset, and this is what you would like me to do. Ask questions to show interest or control the conversation. And that's what I said. When you count to three, you ask those questions, then you become the person who's kind of running the conversation. This is important. Asking questions shows you're interesting, and that goes hand in hand with active listening. If you listen to someone and they say something that sounds interesting, you can ask them a follow-up question. And then they kind of lock in, and those conversations become really good. You can learn a lot about the person, what motivates them, where they are on a project, and what you need to do to help. So open-ended questions is to encourage the speaker, because you ask them an open, so what was your, first, half of the day like today? That's open-ended. So they can say, well, at 8 o'clock, I logged on, I looked on my email, I got on my inbox, I went into a class, blah, 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 all that type of stuff. Close, ended questions, yes or no questions, or questions that have a finite answer that can't be expanded on. Uh, or something you would use to shut down a conversation. It's also something we can use to kind of bring someone down from a level of anxiety, a high level of anger. It's something that our customer service department is very good at. Sometimes they pick up the phone and it's just someone immediately ranting. Okay, so you have to listen. You count those 3 seconds, and then you ask questions like, okay, how do you spell your last name? What's your ASI number? If I lose you somehow on this call, what's the best number to call you back on? And that's something that the customer service rep already has in front of them. All right. If the person calls in, they give their name and the ASI number, they just pull that up in the CRM. But what it really does, it actually moves them from the emotional side of their brain back to the logical side, and that's when they're angry like that. They're operating on pure emotions. But when you have to, when you ask them that yes or no question, that question that can't be expanded upon, the brain automatically switches over, and that helps bring them down and give you control as well. And if you haven't yet, one day you'll call into some customer service line because you're having an issue with Comcast or Verizon or whatever it is, and they're going to ask you qualifying questions. A lot of times people call in because they're upset, but the qualifying questions is one, to make sure that you are the person who owns the account. But the other thing it kind of brings you down, hopefully gets you over to that logical side, so we're not operating on pure emotion. And avoid abruptly changing the subject. I have a dear friend of mine at work I've known for my whole career here, 27 years, and we have conversations, and she will just pivot to a new topic, and it's like, I guess we're done. It's kind of a joke now with us. It's funny, but if we're talking about work and we're working on something together, and we haven't finished the conversation on this part of a project or this part of what I'm doing, we want to make sure that we finish up that conversation, rather than just like, all right, let's go to something else. And that goes with the active listening too. You have to pay attention. And be aware of body language, yours and theirs. Now, with body language, you might have heard this at some point, that this means that someone is closed to what you're saying. They're not receptive to it. That couldn't be further from the truth. Sometimes it's just a comfortable way to sit. Sometimes it's a little chilly. People cross their arms. It's kind of self-soothing as well. But be aware of that. Other body language too. If you're in a situation, even remotely here, if you're on a one-on-one with your manager, if you're at school and you're one-on-one with a teacher, or a counselor, and you're sitting like this and answering questions like this, and you have your camera on, I mean, that says something. That says something. So be aware of that. And body language is so important, so much so that for 2 years in a row for ASI show runs, and this is back when we had 5 shows. So 5 shows 2017, 5 shows 2018, we had an expert come in and do a class on body language. And she did 2 classes, one in the morning and one in the afternoon on Education Day. And those classes were packed with salespeople because they wanted to know, what am I saying by the way I sit with my clients, the way I stand, the way I have a conversation? Am I giving off any type of message that I'm unaware with? So, and she was really, a neat person. I got to interview her, and I was talking with her. I said, "How's my body language?" She goes, "That's pretty good. You have an open, posture. You speak with your hands open. That means you're inviting people in. So be aware of yours and theirs." And a lot of this, like dealing with difficult people, comes down to assertiveness, being assertive. Now, if we look at our little graph down here, assertive is in the middle. On the left-hand side is being passive. When you're a passive person, people step on you. Okay, they're going to step all over you because you're unwilling to step up and defend yourself. On the other side is aggressive. That's like someone approaches you, you try to have this conversation, you step all over them. Okay, where we want to meet is in the middle. Being assertive because we're able to speak our mind, but not in an aggressive tone, and we take the passive or anyone's passive, intuitions, way they operate or act, into consideration, so that we can be more effective with our communication. So one of the things with assertiveness is say what you mean and mean what you say. Mean what you say. My first job out of college, that was the president of the company. I don't know how many times on a flip chart or on a dry erase board during meetings that he would get frustrated and he would write that up on the board. Say what you mean and mean what you say. If you need to deliver news that might not be that difficult, might not be that pleasant, might be more difficult, you have to just say it. Don't dance around the topic, but own those words, okay? Sometimes you need to gather thoughts, and that's okay. I would rather ask someone a question and have them gather their thoughts and then respond than have someone just spewing at the mouth and it's babbling. It's all over the place. Now, like I'm trying to listen actively, but I can't follow along. So say what you mean and mean what you say. And again, it is okay to gather your thoughts. Be clear, honest, straightforward, and what I think most importantly, be respectful. Honesty is the best policy. If you're working with someone and you feel that they're not holding up their end of the bargain, you just need to make that clear. Um, if you're working group projects at work, and if you're working on group projects at school, and there's someone who always seems to be a slacker, I mean, you need to let that person know. It's easy to talk about it with the group, everyone else in the group, but it's more important to speak to that person. And clear, honest, straightforward, and respectful conversation. What that gives that person who's slacking the opportunity to do is to correct the behavior. And if we look at those difficult people, some of those types, the no person who doesn't want to do anything. I mean, clear, honest, straightforward, and respectful. It's like you have to explain to them why their input is important, why their contributions to this team is important. This type of conversation can be very scary. People are not comfortable with confrontation. There are some, the dictators are, the know-it-alls are, but a majority of people, or I would say a lot of people, aren't. So it's something you just have to do. Take that deep breath and let's talk. Use I statements and avoid the words always and never. You would never say, well, everyone thinks, or we all think. Just speak from your point of view. Even if there are others within your group who agree with you, you're not there to speak on behalf of the group. You're there to have a conversation with that person. So use I statements. I think it would be better if we handle something this way. I think the way that you treat me is not nice, and I would like you to stop. And the words always and never are just going to lead almost always to a fight. You know what? You always say that. You never help me with this. You're never here on time. You always take someone else's time. And those are so, like always is like there's no gray area. And a lot of times there are gray areas. So when we avoid those terms, words, we use those I statements, we speak from ourselves and for ourselves. I think that those conversations can become a little easier. And address behavior, whether it's desired behavior or that which needs to be changed. And that's going to come from a manager standpoint. Like maybe they have an employee whose behavior needs to be changed. You need to be back from lunch on time. You need to be at work on time. You need to make 10 calls a day instead of 5 calls a day. Whatever that is, that's the behavior that you address. It's never like you're always late. You're so disorganized. Everyone thinks that you're dragging down the team. It's like, no, it's that I realize that you come into work a little late. I need you to come in early. I need you to make those 10 calls rather than the 5 calls. Show some respect too through tone of voice and non-adversarial body language. And the adversarial body language is like that finger pointing, those faces, those getting mad, this in your hand. And those are things that could be very knee jerk. And again, that goes back to what we're going to learn in EQ, that self-awareness, we think that in the workplace, there's a lot of introspection and finding out who you are, what motivates you, what drives you, what stops you in your track, for lack of a better word, what triggers you for those distressing emotions to come to the top, are things that are very important and tie into a lot of stuff that we talk about in our professional development type classes. All right, be humble. Being humble is easy. We all have faults, right? Understand that we're no better or worse than anyone else. And plus, you don't know what someone's going through that day, too, right? Someone might be in a bad mood. Someone might had, just receive word that a parent has cancer. That's going to affect them. And whether we like it or not, or want to or not, that can come into the workplace too. So, someone might just be a little sullen or a little quiet and stuff because they got bad news, that they don't want to share. So be aware of that. So I'm not calling that a fault. I mean, we all have our faults and things that we do, but understand that, hey, no one's better than the other person, and it's okay to be wrong and to admit when you don't understand or know something. That's something that I learned early on in my career. Instead of trying to fumble around and find a reason and make excuses, it was okay to say, hey, you know what, I messed up. I understand that now. When someone points that out, and that's okay to make those mistakes. The problem is when we can't correct them, we keep making those mistakes over and over again. So when you're in any situation and you have questions, you have to ask. I always say, raise your hand if you're not sure where to go. In editorial, I'll use as an example because that's where I started my career here. Having to write my first article, I was like, okay, like, yeah, that's great. And then sitting there at the desk and kind of like, how do I do that? Who do I call? I don't know who to call. I didn't ask questions. Like, can I have some help? Who would be some great resources for this? Where can I find that information? And we used to have like this library of resources. That was before the day of the internet. But if you don't know, ask questions, because when you ask questions, you also learn as well. Okay. Give others the benefit of the doubt, and that can go back to, you don't know what type of day someone's having, and minor slip-ups happen, and that's okay. Don't sit there and kind of constantly go back to that and constantly go back to that. My first job, I had a run-in with one of our line managers, and we butt heads, and it got back to the VP of the company, and for the next 2.5 years, I used to have to listen about that. It's like, really, we aren't past that. Me and the line manager, we made nice, we never had another incident, but give us the benefit of the doubt. One of us might have been having a bad day. So don't hold something like that against someone. You just chalk it off, hopefully, as a one-off. Serve others and not yourself first. That's the humble servant. That's something that happens in the military, that the enlisted personnel eat before the brass, right? The officers. So when you can, is how can I help? What can I do? And really, when you do that type of stuff, you make yourself an asset to a company, and it can lead to growth opportunities as well. When I started at ASI, I've got a long backstory, but I started as an older intern, just to get some experience. I have a degree in broadcast journalism, but I was trying to get a job in print journalism, and so I wanted it for the experience, and I wanted to learn how to do everything. I asked questions. I volunteered to write articles that no one else wanted to do, that everyone used to hug, groan, and moan about. Um, yeah, I wanted to learn everything, and that eventually led to opportunities for me. So, serving others in this case is basically, how do I serve the department that I work in? What else can I do? How can I take something off of your, plate there, so to speak, and help you out? You learn things, you become an asset, and again, that can lead to growth. And value others' time as much as your own. One of my pet peeves is if we have a 10 to 11 o'clock meeting scheduled, we should start at 10, and then we should end by 11 o'clock. If you start a minute or two late, that's okay, because some people might be coming off of something else and have to jump on. Or if you're in the building, run from one end to the other. That's okay. But making people wait for 15 minutes, unless there's extenuating circumstances, and we know that there are, and that goes back to give others the benefit of the doubt. We all have things in life we have to do, and sometimes you're calling a doctor and trying to get a doctor's appointment, you're on hold, but it's important that you're in the queue and you need to get that doctor's appointment. It happens with me. So late to a meeting, when I had to explain that. But just value someone's time. When we have our class, excuse me, when we have our classes, we try to be very conscious of the end time because we want to make sure that we end on time. We don't want to take up too much time, and we want to hopefully leave times for Q&A. And listen more than you talk. Listen more you talk. For someone like me, that's very difficult. But I could ask you a question from now until midnight and just listen to you talk. I find people so interesting. So if you want someone to talk more than you talk, just ask questions and pay attention to what they're saying. And finally, with difficult people, take the high road. Don't stoop to their level. If someone's going to engage in name calling, don't stoop to that level. Because to me, if someone starts name calling, it's like, man, it doesn't help your argument, and it's like, it doesn't help me, get there. It's like, let's do this in a professional, respectful way. All right, never look down on anybody unless you're helping them up. That's a quote by Jesse Jackson. So, let's remember that. And, through the workplace, we can forge, good relationships with people, even those people who might be someone we think are more on the difficult side. So, any questions or thoughts? Anyone? I'm going to come back here, open this up. And anyone want to share any experiences that they might have had with someone in the workplace, a classmate, if you're on a team, is anyone that's been difficult, can be frustrating. We're good? All right, well, thank you, everyone. I said, being conscious of the time, and now we're 3 minutes over, so that's on me.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome, John. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your weekends. Hopefully, everyone has something fun to do. We didn't have any type of fun activity for the ASI interns today, so sorry. Or maybe that's a good thing. You're all done with showing us your stuff from your house and answering questions. You're trying to think who that person might be. So, all right. If at all you ever have any questions for us, as I said, and I'll always say, you can email us, you can send us to chat, and we will answer that. Any of the industry interns, if you have any questions that we can answer for you, you can always send us emails, jhaley@asicentral.com. You can get in touch with Christine Shaw. Christine will answer your questions as well. I'm on the industry intern Facebook page as well, so you can post questions in there, and we're going to get you answers.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see y'all. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.